Hey everyone, it's good to see you guys. I'm here with Renee Slansky. She is a professional dating and relationship coach whose advice has reached millions of people all around the world. Her focus is love education, self awareness, breaking limiting beliefs, and she sets women up to find and cultivate healthy relationships. She's been on BuzzFeed, Huffington Post, ABC, and many more. Renee, Laura, and I are really excited to have you here. Thank you so much for taking some time out to be with us.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited to be able to chat with both of you guys. I love these sort of things.
Perfect. So where do we want to
where do we want to start?
I feel like there's a whole area that we can go into because Jared and I, we really talk about very conscious relationships, very awakened relationships. And we feel like there's not too many conscious couples that we can really look at and go, that's kind of what we're going for. You know, it's kind of a new thing where there's a new type of relationships that are unfolding. So why don't we kind of let you, whatever your opinion is on conscious connections and healthy relationships and what looks healthy to you and what you would say to avoid or to go for. So maybe we'll just start there.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, I think nowadays the main issue is that we have so many ways to find love via dating apps, online dating, reality TV, you name it, that people assume that access to dates equals success in love. And so they're out there dating because they can, not necessarily because they should or because they have the desire to, but they're not actually working on, as you said, the healthy foundations in order to be able to build a healthy love. And so that's when people become frustrated and they're like, well, you're not the right person, so next. You know, they literally just swipe away their love life because they aren't fully aware of what it takes to build a healthy relationship. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about love education, because we're not taught this stuff unless we've had amazing parents literally sit down and, you know, teach us, okay, this is what you should be looking for, this is how you should date, this is what the fundamentals are, and then on top of that, model a healthy relationship in their own marriage. We are just left out there being guided by our feelings, being guided by what's trending, what's going on in the world. And before you know it, we're creating these cycles in our life and wondering why we're not getting anywhere in love. And I think being consciously aware of how to build a healthy relationship not only comes down to accountability and being aware of what you're doing as a person, what your own baggage is, what your own growth needs to be, but I think it's also being consciously aware of what the other person needs. And that's where the education part comes in, because for me, I find that there's so much focus, especially for women, like, you know, tell him what you need, assert your need, assert your worth, your value, your high value, your all of this and that. But it's not just about that. It's also about understanding, well, what do men need and what does a relationship need to function properly? And people are getting things like chemistry mixed up with compatibility, sex mixed up with intimacy, all this sort of stuff, because let's face it, there's not really that education out there. And I think that is the key to be able to actually build healthy relationships.
I love that. Yeah, I love what you said about actually having the ability to build a healthy relationship, because we have so many offerings. There's like a buffet for everyone. It's ease of access, but actually creating that success in the relationship is a whole nother story.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I have a lot of people and clients who come to me and they're at a stage of their relationship where they're like, you know, I love him and I know that he loves me, but things just aren't moving or things just aren't progressing. And I always say the two biggest indications of a healthy relationship are peace and progress. It's not that you won't have absence of conflict, but there's still going to be some underlying peace. And what I find is that people assume, well, I'm compatible because we both want the same goals, or we both like the same things, and we're both on the same page and we have a connection. But a part of compatibility is the ability to have the capacity to grow and to change where you need to in order to be able to move in the same direction, because change is inevitable. And just because you've met someone and you like the same things, it doesn't mean that that relationship has the capacity to continue to move in the same direction as a unified couple. And it's one of those things that I think people think, well, a guy may love you or a woman may love you, which is amazing. They may even have the desire to change the things that they need to change about themselves. But do they have the capacity to be able to do it? That's another thing. And I think that's what either makes or break a relationship.
Wow. Yeah, I'm seeing like capacity and capability. Like, is there that capacity to change, but then do they have the ability to even make those necessary changes in order to be compatible and have that level of intimacy?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think that's the part where we have to look at someone's actions, right, over their words, because it's very easy for someone to say, oh, I want to do this and I want to do that, but are they actually doing it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, actions will always take preference over words. And the thing is that actions obviously build trust that, okay, well, you're saying this, so therefore and you're following it through with your actions, and therefore I believe that you are what you say and what you do is authentic, because authenticity is produced by congruency in the brain. Okay, and congruency is basically the number one thing in your brain that helps give peace. Okay, so scientifically speaking, obviously stress is like the number one trigger in the brain, because it's like a survival instinct. Okay, brain gives us stress to keep us alive, and sometimes that can be negative stress, which then turns into fear, which then obviously debilitates us emotionally, mentally, and physically. Now, congruency is produced when what we expect, because somebody has said this, they've said, I will text you later. Okay, so we have this expectation then attached to what they've said, and they've followed it through with their action. Now, if that person says, I will text you later, or I will change, or I'll be a better communicator, or I'll be faithful, or whatever it is, and then their actions don't line up with that, that obviously produces some sort of incongruency, which then results in the stress in the brain, which then means less trust. It just becomes a spiral of like all these sort of things that just then start to crumble a relationship. Things don't just fall apart for no reason. And a lot of the time, and you guys probably get the same when you have people message you and you're like, I don't understand, and he just ghosted me, or it just fell apart, or it doesn't not just come from nowhere out of thin air. It usually starts with little incongruencies.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, I have a background in the military, so for us, like words and actions, like that was grilled into us day one, where it's like what you speak aligns to the actions that you take. And I'm not saying that there's little slip ups, but I was pretty much conditioned to have a really strong fear response around those two not being lined up. And I know for me in my own development, it eventually got to a point where it was like my heart knew right away if someone's words weren't lining up. Like it was almost like my heart was feeling. We've been talking a little bit about the physiology of the body and how we have the brain, but now there's neurocardiology. We're learning that the same neurons that are in our prefrontal cortex are in our heart, and even there's neurons in our stomach lining.
Yes.
And so it's like I think when we really start to evolve as human beings and we tap into those deeper intelligences, it's almost like you get a deeper sense of when a person's words aren't lining up with their heart. And like the heart is just, emotions are what moves us. And that's where the heart is generating. So it's whenever someone says something and I get a sense that there's no follow through at this point in my life, I'll always ask, I'll be like, do you really mean that? Like, I'm not I think it's really important to hold people accountable, and whether it's in a business deal, a relationship, whatever it may be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, accountability is what, as I said, like helps build trust. It keeps people responsible to their role, which helps produce growth. I think that the problem is that what people do is they get that gut feeling, but then they don't follow it up with, okay, well, I should be doing this because I know that this person is not doing this, because fear takes over. And that's where they start to get stuck. And especially with a lot of women, where they have the fear of fear of rejection, fear of what if he doesn't text me? So you know what, I'm just going to keep texting, or it's that fear of missing out. What if I never find my man? What if I never find my husband? And unfortunately, people may have that instinct, but when fear starts to drive their decisions, that's when they don't live an intuitive life. Okay, they live a life based on again, fear. And if you live a life based on fear, you're never going to produce the peace that you want or the progress in your relationships.
Yeah. Do you think, I mean, we've talked about this on our channel before, where people kind of fall in love with hope or fall in love with what could be rather than what actually is? I mean, I know I've done that years ago where I think, oh, but this could be amazing. Like, we could be doing this and we could do that. But the reality is that that's never going to happen because that person was where he was. I was where I was. But people kind of fall in love with the hope or the what if. You see that a lot?
Oh, definitely. People fall in love with, more so women, I must say. People fall in love with potential rather than patterns. They fall in love with the idea of who they want that person to be or the idea of love. And what I see, even some of what my clients do, is when they find a guy, there's that potential for that to go somewhere. They then start to put him on a pedestal. And they're not essentially putting him on a pedestal, they're putting the idea of love on the pedestal. And what they've done is they've gone, okay, I'm putting love on a pedestal because I don't actually believe that I'm worthy of it. Okay, that's what it is. I believe that I want it. And then as soon as I have someone that may embody it, okay, because I've got a connection with this person, they then associate that person with love, then put that on the pedestal, because they have this deep underlying belief that they aren't, again, worthy of love. And if we can understand that love isn't something to be hunted down, it is something that is already there. It's just a matter of inviting it in. We then take it off the pedestal and we realize, I don't have to idolize this. I don't have to, make it out to be something because I have this fear. If it's not this something, then I'm going to miss out on it. Okay, which is basically where rose-colored glasses come in, where we start to deny red flags and all these sort of things, or we build that person up to be who we want them to be instead of looking at the reality of who they are. And then that's where people start to lose themselves in identity. Women start to put all their focus on men, all their focus on love, and then essentially it drives that person away.
Right. I loved, Renee, what you said there about falling in love with potential as opposed to pattern. I think that's so key to realize. And I mean, I see this not just in relationships, but sometimes in my own life, when I look at the past, I fell in love with a certain idea of how my life should look. Or could you speak more, I guess, to why that happens? Why people fall in love with the idea and the potential as opposed to the pattern and the reality?
Yeah, I think because obviously it has a lot to do with what our brain is cognitively familiar with. Okay, so and also what we're lacking or what we're just have experienced as a child. So, for example, if you had a father that maybe was never really around, never really gave you the love or the affection that you wanted, and then you've gone and attracted someone that is similar because you've got wound meeting wound, you're then hoping that if you can have what you want from that person because you never got that from your father, that makes you think, well, okay, well, he's not my father, because you're obviously not dating someone to just be like your dad, but you're hoping that they have those glimpses of what you lacked as a child. And as soon as you find just a little bit of a hint of that, it's like you glorify that, okay? And then that becomes your focus, and that becomes your reason to keep investing in someone, because you're like, but if he just does this and does this and then blah 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 and everything like that. And we're basically setting ourselves up for an unmet expectation, which then obviously doesn't get matched, which then produces frustration. And we sit there and we wonder, well, why isn't this relationship going anywhere? Why is this not working? I know that it could if blah blah blah. And we focus on the if rather than, no, this is what is happening. This is the reality of the situation. And we almost future date. We date the future version of that person, which isn't even guaranteed anyway.
Right.
Date them.
Yeah, that's so true. And do you think it's a part of that inner child just wanting to be loved and healed? Like, if I can just get this guy to stay, then that inner child that couldn't get their dad to stay, like, it's sort of if I can just keep that or get him to do that, then I'm going to feel loved. Finally going to have a man that stays, or finally going to have a real love. Is it the inner child, do you think, that's kind of pulling on that?
Yeah, look, it is definitely, we're seeking what we didn't have. I think for women, women are actually wired genetically to seek validation right from birth. So when female babies are born, they will instantly look for eye contact with a parent, whereas a male baby, if you hold a male baby, his eyes will be like all around the room and he'll be searching and things like that. Female babies are looking directly for visual contact. And the reason why is because we are biologically wired to seek that instant validation, that love, that care from, a father figure or a mother figure. And so if we don't have that as a child, we're then constantly searching for that later on in life. And this is why women are often seen as, the one chasing men, the one struggling to get a man to commit, all this sort of stuff, because they haven't learned how to validate themselves or love themselves enough. They're still seeking what they didn't get as a child, and it's now trickled because it's become one of their preferences in their brain, which we can't erase. So we can't erase preferences. Preferences are kind of like our default, but we can make conscious choices. And I think when we talk about conscious relationships, Laura, like you were saying in the beginning, a conscious relationship is about going, okay, this stuff has happened to me as a child. It hasn't been amazing, but I now choose to create the life and the relationship that I want as an adult because I can choose differently. And it's not going to be easy. It is a process, especially if you've got decades of thinking one way and wanting one way. And I think also that when it comes to holding on to hope and holding on to potential with someone, it really depends on your personality type, if you're someone who's a fixer, or if you're someone who's a giver, which a lot of women are. They want to rescue men. They want to, not necessarily change men because they are doing it from a negative point of view. They're trying to help them be the best versions of themselves. And that's when a lot of women end up giving too much and toxic men who basically take advantage. Again, it's amazing. It's fascinating. You can get so deep into all of this.
Yeah. I was just thinking of all the times that I tried to make women better, and then all the times that they tried to make me better. It just never worked out really well. It doesn't work. Obviously, it's just not. Renee, what do you think? So, I'm always interested in, we don't have examples of. At least I don't see any, because you can't really write too many dramatic stories off of it. But it's in the modern world, we're inundated with all these narratives and these stories of the idealistic relationship, but they're all really unhealthy. And there's no actual models of what a healthy relationship would look like. Do you think it's possible to create a healthy or a conscious relationship model that would be appealing to society at a greater level? Or do you know of any examples?
I mean, some of the stuff that I do, for example, I have an 8-week course for my girls out there, and it is all about love education. It's literally, okay, for me, it's a house. A relationship is a house. So you need a strong foundation. And the strong foundation is basically the relationship with yourself. Understanding that the relationship with yourself determines the quality of the relationships that you have in your life around you. So in a house, you know that if you don't have a strong foundation, you can't build anything else on top of that is going to last, okay? You have to have that strong foundation, which is basically knowing yourself, knowing your strengths, your weaknesses, your potentials, your patterns, all of that, not feeling that you need to be a finished project in order to love, which I think a lot of people that have experienced trauma or, really negative sort of relationships in the past, they feel that, well, I need to heal entirely first before I'm worthy of love, which isn't the truth. You can still be worthy of love and healing at the same time. We're all a work in progress. I think then once we've got that solid foundation, before we even go out there and start seeking love, searching for the man, searching for the woman, you have to be able to identify what it is that you're meant to be looking for in the first place. Because if you don't know what it is that you're looking for, you're not going to be able to recognize it when it comes along. And what will happen is your default pattern will take over, and then you'll just end up choosing the wrong sort of person again and again. So there needs to be that education. So after self-love, releasing yourself of crap that you've been holding on to and taking full accountability and responsibility, you need to be educated on, okay, guys, let's get black and white here, because it's very much 50 shades of gray out there. You know, there's a lot of variations of how love should be and this and that. And for me, I mean, I'm someone that is very traditional. I'm a Christian, so I have Christian beliefs, and I base a lot of my teachings off what I believe to be my truth, and the truth of what I think is needed, because it's different between want and needed, and you have to focus on the need to build a relationship, because need is fundamental. Need is, okay, you need to have trust. You need to have the ability to want to communicate and grow through communication. You know, you need to understand men and women operate differently. You can't go out there and date men and expect you from him when already biologically we are wired differently. Okay, so there needs to be education on the difference of the sexes. There also needs to be education on the process of dating, so that it becomes something that is joyful, so it becomes something that is full of romance, so it becomes something that becomes an evaluation process of their character to work out, are we compatible? Do we want the same things? Is there chemistry? Great, but is there something more than that? So that becomes the love education part. After that, you have to then go, okay, well, how do I date? How do I date, and how do I attract my ideal partner in the way that it isn't exhausting and it isn't full of heartache? Okay, and so that kind of becomes the stuff that we fill the house with. Okay, so you've got the foundation, then you've got the structure in the wall, which is the love education, which is essentially the guidelines that you have to keep in order to be able to make sure that you're on the right path. Then going out and dating is basically, you know, the brick and mortar, filling your house with all the things that you want in order to be able to build an amazing relationship, okay, which is essentially the person that you're choosing to connect with. And there's a way to do that. Again, like, people like, oh, great, I'll just go on this app and I'll just do this. And it's like, okay, go on that app if you want, but what's your intention behind it? What's your mindset? Do you know what to say on the first date, so that you can start to already assess that person's character while still having fun? Okay. I personally believe there is a smart way to do love. I really, truly believe that, because I've seen it in my own life. I've seen it in my clients' lives. And it's not meant to be hard. It's not meant to be this awful, hard, draining process. And then the last thing about that is keeping the roof on. And the roof is basically keeping everything intact so that you get beyond the honeymoon stage. And that is about knowing, okay, what are the 6 phases of a relationship? What happens when you start to have outside influences like social media and family, stress, work, finance, all these sort of contributing factors to relationship breakdown? How do you not lose your own identity as you start to move into a relationship with someone? How do you keep the spark alive? All these sort of things. So for me, yes, absolutely, there is a structure to have a healthy relationship. It is not as complicated as what other people think. It is actually highly accessible if you know which coach or program to be able to get it from. And it works. It really does.
Beautiful. But Renee, why don't you think people are like, why aren't we educated on this? You know, like, I mean, this is relationship. I was just reading this Harvard study. It was the longest running study, 75 years plus. And they found that amongst all these people that they studied for over 75 years, that relationship and being a part of a social community was what made people feel happy and enjoy their life. It gave them the zest and the juice of life. But we're not taught emotional intelligence. We're not, at least I definitely I wasn't. I had to learn that the hard way. But it's so important, integral to human well-being and enjoyment of life. And that's why I love the work that you're doing, because it seems like you're really pulling the paradigm in a different direction.
I think, sorry, Laura, did you want to say something?
I was going to ask a question, but I'll ask it afterwards.
Okay.
I'll let you.
I think when it comes to relationships, okay, we're humans. We're not created to be alone. If we were created to be alone, there'd be one person on the earth and that's it, right? So we are created for relationships. We are wired intrinsically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally to seek out others and to be sought out. And that is something that we should be unapologetic about, especially when it comes to love. We're built to love. We're built to be in love with someone. And it is something that, when harnessed properly, is one of the most incredible things that you can ever have, is having an amazing relationship with someone that brings value to your life. I think that what we're dealing with is generational cycles. I don't think this is just like, oh, we're in the 21st century and we don't talk about love. No, this has been going on for like the beginning of time, right?
Right.
And we've had things that, everything from different periods of history where, obviously women had different roles in society. And people like, from my grandparents' generation, everything was swept under the rug. Nothing was talked about, which has all been, influenced by what's been going on in that era, the environment, the war, all of that. And now we're getting to a time in history where we are becoming more vocal about how we feel, where we're becoming more vocal about identity, choice. We do have things like role reversal. We're encouraging people to speak about mental health. It's now becoming something that people talk about, where back in the day, even in my parents' day, and probably your guys' parents' days as well, like mental health wasn't really spoken about, We're becoming more vocal about love because of online dating and dating apps. I remember I met my first boyfriend on rsvp.com back in the day when I was like 18 years old. And that was like a while ago now. So, but it was very taboo at the time. And now fast forward, mainly because of dating apps becoming more socially acceptable, we are becoming more open to the idea of love becoming something that we can talk about. Now, that's a good thing, but it's also something where all of a sudden everyone has an opinion on how love should be. And like I said, that's where it becomes 50 Shades of Grey. That's where we start to romanticize toxic forms of love. That's where we start to have this person have the opinion and this person have an opinion. And everyone's just now becoming really confused on, okay, well, what should the standard be? Or what am I supposed to do? And that's why I think, when we think of education, we have obviously sex education, and sex education is completely different to love education, because love education is obviously dealing with like interpersonal stuff within yourself, as well as dealing with someone else and who they are. And I think that real education is something that produces growth. And I think if there are people out there and they're confused by what is right and what is wrong, as I said, what gives you peace and what gives you progress? That's probably your answer to what is right.
Do you think there's certain things that every single person should look for when they're looking at building a relationship, or if they're, like you're saying with dating, like do you think there's certain things that every single person should make sure is in place before going forward into a relationship, or do you think it just varies for everyone?
No, I think there needs to be fundamentals. I'm not saying that you have to find someone that is perfect. Every relationship will require grace. Grace towards yourself, and grace towards the person that you're dating. We are broken people, dating broken people. None of us are perfect here. However, I do believe that we can't keep using the excuse, well, he's broken, I'm broken, so therefore, it's just the way it is. When no, we have the ability to choose, and we have the ability to make better choices for ourselves and to choose better people who add value to our life. Fundamentals like, what is their character like? And I always say to my girls, focus on their character, not the commitment, because their character will
naturally make them commit.
No, not necessarily. Their character will determine the quality of commitment. Because,
right. Okay. It's like, I always tell people when they say, like, sometimes I'll get the question, like, how do I be more confident? And I just say, you don't need to be confident. You need to have convictions. And when you have convictions, you'll naturally be confident. It's something similar. Renee, you mentioned something really interesting, and this is going to go way deeper. So I'm really excited to get into this. You mentioned having grace in relationship. Can you talk more about, because this is something that I think in the back of my mind on a daily basis. Can we talk more about the intersection between grace and honoring your value systems? Because in a sense, grace, I see it as, kind of giving space for those unknown variables or those parts of a person that really just need compassion and love, free of judgment.
Yeah.
But at the same time, who we connect with, we become, and our values are really integral to who we are. And I could see there's a really gray area that gets formed between grace, but also honoring our value systems. Can we talk more about that line? Because I think that's a really fun, deep place to go.
Yeah. So when I talk about grace, I'm not talking about denying what they're doing or justifying what they're doing. If someone's in a relationship and say they have had an affair, okay, let's use that as an example. You can't just go, oh, well, it's okay, I'll give them grace, I'll forgive them, and then just like be okay with it, because clearly it's not okay, right? It's something that is wounding the relationship, because it's coming from another wound inside that person who initiated the affair, and obviously it's going to wound the other person in the relationship. Grace is room for growth. If there is no growth, then that grace needs to have a boundary. And I think that's the key here. When we think of grace, grace isn't necessarily pardoning without accountability. Grace comes with accountability. Okay? Grace comes with accountability. It doesn't come with judgment. Accountability is, okay, I see what you're doing. I'm trying to understand why it's happening so that I can make sure that, I'm able to make the right decision and you're able to make the right decision because you're aware of what's happening in the first place. Okay? If you are judging someone, or if you're forgiving them to then use it against them, then you're not really pardoning them at all. It becomes more like a control thing, which then just becomes something toxic to the relationship. Or just forgiving them and then just like pretending that everything is okay is just complete denial, and it is basically affirming negative behavior. Grace is understanding that we're all going to make mistakes. And as long as we are learning from those mistakes and growing from those mistakes and taking full responsibility from those mistakes, then that relationship has an opportunity to continue to grow. That is what grace is in a healthy grace. Well, there's only, like, for me, grace isn't toxic, it's healthy. I just think that people have a misunderstanding of what real grace actually looks like. And as I said, grace isn't about just being okay with everything. Grace comes with accountability and growth.
Beautiful. I love that. Laura, did you want to ask something?
Well, Jared and I talk a lot about spiritual bypassing on our channel, and I think people do that in relationships as well, when they're connected to the possibility, or they're connected to someone's energy more than the physical person. And so I see it in relationships where people say, oh, it's okay, he did that because, he's been through a lot in his childhood, and I can understand why he did that. And they kind of excuse the behavior of someone, right? Spiritual bypassing in a relationship. Did you have anything that you want to say about do you see that a lot as well, when people just let people off the hook because they understand the spiritual meaning behind it and they don't look at the actual implication of it?
Yeah, absolutely. It happens all the time. I see it happen all the time. It's basically, again, people wanting to believe that the idea of who that person is in front of them can be a reality. And they're also believing that love is enough. The feeling of love is enough to be able to keep that relationship going. And like, this is where obviously it can get a little bit gray. And that's why I'm saying, like, as long as there is growth through people working through their baggage, then there is the possibility of that relationship to move forward. However, when things happen that are detrimental to a relationship, there also has to be boundaries, even though there's that grace. Okay. There has to be, okay, you just did this and I understand why you did it. So I'm not necessarily going to attack you for it. Okay. And I'm not going to hold it against you as your identity or as the identity of our relationship. However, I'm not going to accept it. Okay. Right. Accountability doesn't mean that you accept crap. Accountability is, okay, I see what is happening. I'm trying to understand why it's happening, but I'm not going to put up with it because it isn't healthy to our relationship. And obviously people, I think for me, I think the reason why people just go, oh, no, it's okay, I understand why he did this and this and that, is because they have this underlying fear that they won't get anything better, okay, or they're going to miss out on love, or they love that person so much, which is normal when you are in love with someone, that you want to keep that relationship alive no matter what they do, because you do see their potential. You do know them better than anyone else. You understand that, it isn't what they did to you, isn't necessarily them trying to hurt you, but it is still detrimental behavior. And so we can't just base it off how we feel. We have to base it off, okay, well, what is fundamental here to a relationship growing and moving forward? And that's a hard thing to do, because it might mean that you have to step back. It might mean that relationship breaks down until that person works out their crap, and then maybe there's an opportunity for that relationship to come back together. It is a really difficult thing to do, and that's often why people stay in relationships that continue to get worse or never really fulfill them.
Yeah, I remember the first time that I had an experience where I realized love wasn't enough, and that was very heartbreaking and hard to accept. But it's really, I think it's important to let people know that, yeah, there are fundamental frameworks here that we need to be aware of. There's skill sets, there's capabilities, capacities. And if we can arm people with those, that might not be the best word to use, but if we can give people those, then they can have an opportunity to have a really beautiful, longevitous relationship where there is that growth.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think arm's a good word, actually. I think absolutely. Love can be a battle sometimes. And I would say equipping. I use the word equipping them with the tools to be able to build their own love life. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so much Hollywood, Disney idealized of what love. I was the same. I was a total like, I'm going to marry a prince. Funny enough, my fiance is a knight. And grew up in a castle, so I was like, get out of town, it's real.
That's wonderful. That's great.
So, but of course, so then I put him on a pedestal, and then that all didn't work out, and it came crumbling down, and our relationship actually got to a point where we separated for 1 month back in 2016 because we both had things to work on and whatever. But it was something that the biggest revelation for me, the most biggest revelation for me, when our relationship broke down at that point, and I was like, what the heck, I'm here again. I'm teaching women how to not be here, and I'm here myself again, was I am the fairy tale. I am my happy after, not a man, not anyone else. My God is the fairy tale, and I am my fairy tale. And from that moment, I was just like, what am I worried about then? I've already got my happily ever after. It's me. So anything else is an added bonus. And it really does, when you understand that you can give yourself an incredible amount of fulfillment, and that obviously being with someone and falling in love with someone does add to that fulfillment. But if you don't first focus on how to have that fulfillment yourself, you'll constantly be searching for it in somebody else. So, and it just gives you a lot of freedom then. And I see it with my girls when I work with them, when they finally have this self-love and they finally cherish who they are, all of a sudden they get picky about who they actually invite into their life, because they realize I've created something special here with myself. Yeah. And unless you're adding to that, see you later, alligator.
Yeah.
That's it. That is literally it. I mean, I would say that for myself as well. And I'm sure you probably say that for yourself, Jared. Like, we both built our own lives, like our own careers, our own lives, our friendships, surroundings, everything. If someone was to be in my life, you would guarantee they would add value, otherwise they would not be there. I wouldn't let anyone. Like, I see my life as my love. This is my home, my heart, everything. No one steps through those doors if they're not cherished by me, and if they don't cherish me. Yeah, absolutely. Exactly.
I love that. And that's really what it just means to be in your power with yourself, being in power with yourself, with your heart space, and not allowing anything in there. Yeah. Beautiful. Well, I'm going to ask one more question, but guys, if you have any questions for Renee, please bring them forward here. I'd be more than, actually, you know what? Let's just go into questions right now, Renee. So I'm going to go first to Bonnie's question here. Let's bring it up. So Bonnie says, we enable them by letting. How can we help ones we love when they can't see this, or better said, don't want to? As a mother, do you have any suggestions on how I should approach this?
Okay. Enable them by letting. Do you mean, Bonnie, letting them do whatever it is that they want to do?
Yeah, I think what she means is if they can't see the fact that you have value or that you're drawing boundaries, how do you manage that, really?
Yeah,
It seems like that's what she's asking.
Okay, yeah. And that's something difficult because you don't get to choose how other people feel or how other people respond. And that's where you have to understand why standing in your own power is so important and so integral in the beginning, because it gives you the confidence to keep standing firm in your decision, understanding that if that person doesn't value you or see your value or want to change, that's not necessarily a reflection of you, and it's not your responsibility to try and force them or counsel them to step up and be the person that they need to be. And I think being true and authentic within yourself, and then understanding, okay, I'm going to stand in my power, but I'm also obviously going to try and make this work. And if you aren't able to make it work because they choose not to make it work or they don't have the capacity to make it work, that's where you have to have a decision of, okay, the longer that I keep tolerating what they're doing, you are exactly enabling them to be in the same position. And sometimes taking a step back. I am all for keeping marriages together that are healthy. I understand that marriages go through phases and things like that. It's about working through it, but you cannot force someone to do what only they can do in order to be able to make that fundamentally healthy. And it all comes down to communication. To be honest, if you want to know how to approach it, it comes really down to communication. Depending if you're communicating with men or depending if you're communicating with women, there's obviously different dynamics there. But communication really is key. When I say communication, communication is dynamic and communication is there without judgment. Talk to them to understand where they're at rather than to tell them where you want them to be at.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Yeah. One of the things that I always talk about in coaching is holding a vision for someone. If you can see the capacity within them, like hold a vision for them and invite them into that vision. But ultimately, it's up to them whether they want to step up into it or not. And for you to draw boundaries as to where they're trying to pull you down.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't force anyone, unfortunately. But no, it's a good thing, actually.
Free will. It gets in the way every time.
Damn it.
I'm going to go to Laura. Did you have something that you wanted to say there?
No. I was just cool questions here we're asking.
I'm going to bring in pleading healers. Laura, do you want to read that one?
Yeah. So, well, she's asking, do you believe in twin flame relationships? She'd be interested to know more about that. What are your opinions? Everyone has their own opinion. I have mine. Jared has his, and I'm sure you have yours. Jared and I have the same opinion of it, but we'd love to know what your opinion is. I'm sure it will resonate with your opinion.
And I'd love to know what your guys' opinion is. Okay, twin flame. To be honest, I'm not a twin flame person. That is a concept that I only really heard more about in the last couple of years. And I was like, oh, that's nice. That's a nice way to say it. For me, it is about, I believe that personally, you have been created with someone else in mind who's also been created for you. I believe that as a Christian, I believe that when I was created and when God made me, he also created my fiance with me in mind, and created him with me with him in mind. I believe that we are two people that match each other in a way that we add value to each other. If you want to call that a twin flame, sure. At the end of the day, commitment is a choice. And so I can romanticize it by calling it a twin flame, which may help me want to commit more to that relationship, which is amazing. Okay. But I can't go and start to, if things don't work out, or if things, are all of a sudden going a bit messy and this and that, I can't go and just say, oh, well, he's not my twin flame. Because who am I to say what I believe God has created or not created? At the end of the day, I'm making choices. And if those choices that I'm making in that relationship are detrimental, then I'm to blame. Or if his choices that he's making are detrimental, then he's to blame. I think that we romanticize the idea of what soulmates are. For me, a soulmate is something that sounds all very lovely, but at the end of the day, you've got to be aligning with someone who does, again, add value to your life in a way of they help you to become the best version of yourself. They are someone that continues to help you grow in your purpose. So therefore you feel aligned with them mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and you're on the same page. Is that a twin flame? Maybe. That's a nice word, but for me, I'm not really that in my
Right.
whole twin flame soulmate thing.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my opinion of it is that we label these things and we put ourselves in containers, and it makes everything so much more confusing. People think, oh, I believe that's my twin flame, so therefore I'm going to excuse all their behavior. I'm going to commit 1000% to someone who doesn't even know my name, because I've seen that in clients too. And I literally have had people say, I think this is my twin flame. Have you spoken to them? No, they don't know I'm alive. And they dedicate 3 or 4 years to be with that person who doesn't even know that they're alive. That's not, in my opinion, healthy or okay for anyone to be in this situation. And it's more like a wound. It's more of a pull. We have soulmates everywhere. We connect to everyone. We all, and whether people want to label it twin flame or soulmate, at the end of the day, someone can help you grow and they can be your mirror. Everyone's a mirror. We see ourselves reflected back in everyone. And if we choose to see it. So I guess it's just another label that we've put on something to again, it's that fairy tale. Oh, they're twin flames and they're destined together. Well, I don't know.
Girlfriend, I'm 100% on the same page as you. I remember a pastor once saying to me, if you are walking down the aisle to your husband on your wedding day, and obviously you're like, that's the man of my dreams, that's the man I'm going to marry, he's my one, he's my soulmate, he's my twin flame. Why 5 years down the track has that changed? Just because now you're going through a growth period. It is a mindset. Marriage is a mindset. Commitment is a mindset. It is a choice that has to involve actions over feelings. And I think when people use things like soulmate and twin flame, they then start to magnify infatuation and confuse infatuation with love. And then they go, well, because I feel this, therefore it is confirmation that we should be together and what I should do, despite what is actually the reality of the situation. And it's almost like we fall into love instead of actually stepping into love with eyes wide open, knowing who we're actually falling in love with.
Oh, I love that distinction between falling and actually stepping in. It's because falling is more like, I can't help this. I'm kind of a victim. And if this goes bad, then I'm going to play the victim. Whereas stepping in is, no, I'm making the conscious choice and commitment to be with this person. It's much more powerful place to come into it, which if there's more power there, it has a higher chance of success, I would say.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
My whole thing on the twin flame is I really just think that it's a relationship that activates us into our own heart and our connection to what we would maybe call as God and that feeling. And it's just bringing us back to a place of being in relationship with ourselves, relationship with God. And that's like that ultimate connection right there. Like, I think that's what the connection that everyone's really looking for at the end of the day. Because that's the ultimate energy.
And I think if people are like, well, that's my twin flame, it gives them certainty, because one of the 6 human needs is certainty. Having that certainty that I've got confirmation, I can relax. This is my person, right? And so then again, if they've got that mindset of this is my person and that person isn't healthy because they're basing it off of how they feel, and now that they've got their certainty, they're not letting go of it, they will then start to excuse behavior and things like that. So yeah, I think that definitely for me, when people use things like twin flames and soulmates, I often find that they're really searching. They're searching for this connection that I believe can be also experienced elsewhere through God and through yourself, and through real love, a heavenly love. And yeah, but I mean, look, I understand why people do it. And, and I think at the end of the day, as long as you're aligning yourself, as I said, with someone that is able to add value to your life, you can call it what you want.
Yeah. Beautiful. Renee, thanks so much for taking the time out to be with us here. We really appreciate your time and your energy. Wonderful insights, great information. It's been a real honor and pleasure and delight. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It's been awesome.
Renee, what are you doing right now? Do you have any programs coming up? Where can people find you?
Yeah, so they can basically head to my YouTube channel if they want. I do have programs for women. I coach men, but I don't have programs for men. I mainly coach women. So I've got, as I was talking about, my Love Education course, my 8-week course for women. I have other courses, just how to get men to commit. I never do surface level stuff. As you can probably tell from this interview, everything I do is about definitely setting you up to make conscious decisions, because I believe, and you guys are probably the same, as a coach, we're not just here to like enable people. We're here to also educate people to enable themselves later on as well.
Yeah.
So just anything, just search Renee Slansky. I keep it simple. Just my name, Renee Slansky, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. It's all the same. And you can just connect with me there depending on what you want and need. Absolutely.
Beautiful. And guys, those links are right there in the description box below. Feel free to check them out. Renee, thank you so much again. We really appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Bye for now.
Bye.
Beautiful. Well, guys, that's all we have for this. Thanks so much for joining us. If you guys want to check out, Laura and I are doing the Sacred Relationship series. That's in the description box as well. Mm-hmm. We do have, when are we doing? I think we have a couple interviews next week. We don't have any this weekend, but we will be doing live coaching and be continuing the Sacred Relationship series here on out.
Do we have Lee at the weekend, or is that next weekend?
So that's, so Lee will be next week. So we have Alex next week, Coach Lee, and then one more individual who's coming in.
Lots of cool people.
Yeah, I'm excited. This has been great. This has been great. Thanks so much for joining us, you guys. If you have any questions, comments, thoughts, feel free to put them there, and we will all see you soon. Have a great night, everyone.